Episode 7 of Before Work Podcast is brought to you. Oh, wait, we don't have any sponsors yet. Hey, welcome to episode 7 of Before Work Podcast. Make sure to look us up on Twitter at Before Work Pod. You can listen to us at Apple, Spotify, as well as Google Play. And any questions, comments, or concerns that we can hopefully answer, you can email us at beforeworkpodcast@gmail.com. Grant, how you doing?
Oh, pretty good. Some of you might be wondering why Evan always does the intros, and that's just because he's better at it, and we play to our strengths, and I'm lazy and don't feel like reading.
Grant does all of the producing, editing, and yes.
The other stuff, the things.
Grant does his strengths, I do my strengths. Grant's also our world-class marketer and has been doing a wonderful job recruiting listeners from all over the world, literally all over the world.
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me. I tweeted about how we're going to shout out to the one dude in Brazil who listened. If you're still listening, thanks for listening. And if you aren't listening anymore, well, at least tell somebody else so they can listen because, Brazil.
And be sure to look for us going on tour to Brazil this coming summer. Our Brazil tour will kick off June whenever and end June whenever.
Yeah, because, that's how,
We will find, I don't know who you are, listener, but we will find you and shake your hand.
Yeah, apparently they protect people's privacy these days. They wouldn't tell us who it was and where he lived.
We just want to say thanks. Come on, internet.
Yeah, we're not going to steal our identity or anything.
Yeah. It's weird how, we kind of touched on this last week, how, like you said, privacy is like a currency at this point. Mm-hmm. So like people are being okay with so much stuff being leaked to big business. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to personal information amongst people, like most folks freak out over that. Whereas like, I don't want people knowing where I live. Well, it's like, well, you're letting computers into your home to tell businesses where you live.
I also think about, is it easier or harder to steal people's identity in other countries? Because like here we have social security number, which everyone's all like, super tight-lipped about. Be like, you go to the bank and they're like, do you want to say it out loud or do you want to write it down for us? And I'm like, I'll just say it out loud. First of all, like if anyone's listening, like the person who's like creeping at the bank listening, they're probably not smart enough to know what to do with it anyways. And I don't know if they steal my identity, what are they going to do? Like pretend to be me on the podcast?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, obviously, again, you have like the overseas scammers that do what they do and apparently do it well because they continue to do it at a more rapid rate than they used to do it, whether it's computer scams, over-the-phone scams, email scams.
Wait, that prince isn't real?
No, unfortunately not. However, if anyone in Nigeria does listen to us, we will go there and shake your hand.
Yeah, all the princes of Nigeria. We'll have
that need our help with money.
Yeah, we'll all meet together at a coffee shop and we'll just we'll talk it out.
Man, it's crazy that one country, no wonder they're so divided. They have all these princes that are all in financial need.
Yeah, it's definitely seems like a tough situation. Like, how do you decide who does what?
I mean, tough economy, What are you going to do? Got to send the Republicans there. I mean, next topic. Okay. So we were really just talking about a podcast that Grant and I frequently listen to, the JRE, the Joe Rogan Experience.
If you've heard of it, I don't know.
If you've heard of it. If you live under a rock, you might not have. But he recently had, and the gentleman's name escapes me, but
Jack Dorsey.
And is he the founder of Twitter?
Founder, CEO, big head honcho of Twitter.
As well as this Square Pay app.
And some other stuff, probably.
And so I didn't watch that episode, but I did see the episode. I think he had Sam Harris on, and they were talking about how Joe didn't push this gentleman enough with his questioning, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think, again, the big hubbub is, the censoring that is or is not happening on Twitter. I mean, you have people who think that Twitter should be more active in silencing voices that they don't like, which I don't personally agree with. But there's also people who think that they're being censored too much, which I can understand. But I also see that it's a business. You can't be too upset when someone doesn't want you saying things that hurts their business because Twitter is a business. They want to make money. They're not there to do other things. Like this is not a non-profit social media. It's a for-profit social media system. So I mean, you have that, and I also like, why would anybody want to come on to Joe Rogan Experience if they're just gonna get like beat up the whole time like that? Like for Joe, why would he want to do that? Why would he want to start creating a culture with his podcast where you come on and you have to defend yourself the entire time? Like, there's no need to just berate your guests. So I understand, but if people want a little harder questioning, I mean, again, Jack said that he apparently wants to come on again, so maybe Joe can be a little tougher on him. But again, like, why? Like, I think he's probably coming back on because Joe didn't, only talk about this thing that he has to deal with all the time.
Yeah, I mean, Rogan has always done a great job interviewing, and his podcast is picking up more and more steam.
Oh yeah,
whether it's subs on YouTube or even just downloads or listens throughout all platforms. But I mean, he just does a great job interviewing his guests because he's just interested in what they have to say. So you're right. It's not like people are going to come on his podcast and he's just going to try to put him in a tough spot. Like, he just doesn't do that.
Yeah.
He's interested for himself. Like that. I think that's why he even started the podcast. Like,
yeah.
Again, he cares about his listeners, but he also just really wants to interview these people.
Yeah. And I think if he can establish a relationship with this guy, then it's easier for him to get those kind of answers. Like, if people just want that short, that they like that conflict, so that's what they want. But I think if we really wanted to be able to influence this guy into seeing our point of view in a better way, like, we should be encouraging people to have civil and respectful dialogue, because that's just what works better. I mean, like, if people can respect each other, then it's easier for them to see each other's point of view. I mean, there's no reason to have the gotcha idea going on.
Yeah, gotcha journalism is so many other parts of speech.
Everything, really.
It's in everything. Whereas like these podcasters that have these long form podcasts, and I think that's why gotcha journalism is what it is because you either have an article or you have a 5-minute news segment to where you're trying to make the other person look like a fool. Whereas these long form podcasts where you're sitting down for a 3-hour conversation, it's like, well, I'm not going to make you look like a fool. I just want to have a conversation, which I think is just why podcasting is picking up so much speed so quickly, is because it's much more real. There's not as much of an agenda.
Yeah, Joe's crazy because he does like 2-3 interviews a day sometimes.
Yeah,
they're like
he did a couple yesterday for I think 5 hours total or something.
Yeah, and what's also crazy is how popular he is, because if you're on the Apple Podcast app and you look at like the top episodes right now, of the top 10, 2 or 3 of them are him. And then you go to YouTube, that also has those will also get hundreds of thousands of views. So it's like between that and then the other platforms out there, it blows my mind how much Joe. Also, it's weird that Joe's not on Spotify. I realize
he's really not on Spotify.
He's not on Spotify. I mean, Spotify is somewhat recent to the game, but they're making a big hit because a lot of people use them for music, so you kind of get it all in one. But anyways, it's crazy. I just wonder how much sleep he gets and when he does it, because it's not like podcasting is his only game. I mean, he also does comedy. He does
UFC commentary.
Yeah, and he does other stuff. He goes on to other people's shows and does appearances. And he also has time to work out to stay as jacked as he is.
Yeah, he's incredibly disciplined. Like, he's one of those unique people that is just like, it didn't matter what they were going to do in life, they were going to be successful at it. And he's insanely successful at 3 things at the top of their business. Like, he's commentating for the best mixed martial arts company in the world, or I should say the most successful mixed martial arts company in the world. Well, has one of the most successful podcasts in the world. And he's well known as one of, whether you like his comedy or not, he's one of the best comedians in the world, or one of the most well-known comedians in the world. That's really impressive.
Yeah, he does it all. He also has time to go jog up mountains.
Yeah, right. The dude is just so disciplined. It's wild, man. It's a rare breed.
Maybe we should start jogging up mountains. Maybe that's the key. Maybe you need to start jogging mountains.
You just need to jog up mountains, man. I guess that's it. I guess that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to his this morning on the way here to where we are, and I was enjoying his Forrest Gallant, I think is how you say his name. He's this like wildlife expert and stuff, and he apparently has a show or something on Animal Planet. I mean, I don't have cable, so I even when I had cable, I had
no one has cable.
Like I don't watch Animal Planet, but hey, this dude's still super interesting.
I did. I'll say this. I liked the Planet Earth series. Was that on Animal Planet?
I don't know. I get them all confused because like every major company's like, let's do.
Let's film nature.
Let's film nature and put really like dramatic music behind it with a really interesting voice commentation.
That obviously has an accent that's other than American.
Or it's Morgan Freeman.
Yeah. Dude, what if they got someone with a Western Pennsylvania accent? to talk about like the deep seas around Australia.
Yins and hard.
I don't know about them coral reefs. I don't know about them coral reefs. I don't know if it's safe to go down there. I went down to Myrtle. Myrtle was better than going to those coral reefs. I like the Myrtle a lot better. Okay. I'd buy it. I'd watch.
Oh, it'd
be so entertaining.
Or if they like just got someone who is just so boring because they get the people they get and make everything sound amazing. Like you're like watching ants just kind of crawl along a stick, and you're like, and like just describing it, and you're like, oh man, these ants,
right.
Their life's better than mine, and then you're like, oh wait, they just like carry dirt around.
Yeah. Isn't that so true? What is people's fascination with nature? Hey, listen, I get it. You know, God created the universe and it's super intricate and it's real amazing. That's awesome. But animals are also quite dumb. They do what they do and nothing else.
Well, I mean, I think that animals can be interesting. I think that there's plenty of things that aren't that interesting, but also like at the same time, we do more interesting things.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
Because like, you know, we can be like, that's really cool, but it's always in a comparison to them. Like, oh, that's really cool that something that is that simple can do something that cool. Because it's like you wouldn't go do it yourself. Like no one's like, all right, let's get 100 people together and we're just going to go build a dirt mound. And it's going to be awesome. Like everyone, and we're all going to carry the dirt with hands, just like a handful at a time. Just walk really far, leave it there, go back. Like that's what insects do.
Right.
We're talking about like sloths. It's like, what if we just go and hang out in this tree all day long?
Yeah.
And just hang out and just look sleepy all the time.
And I guess we're proving our own point here, where maybe people do think animals are just stupid and not very intelligent. But then when they can do the simplest thing, we're like, oh wow, I didn't realize that was capable of doing that.
It's like when a toddler like picks up a block and puts it, you know, in the correct space.
and then the parents are like, he's so smart. He's so smart. Unbelievable.
Which, I mean, I do have nieces and a nephew, and they do cool things for how old they are. I am impressed, but at the same time, I'm still like, I mean, yeah, if Evan came in here and learned how to open up this door, I'd be like, it took you this long? But if like,
oh, dude.
You know, but if an 18-month, you know, toddler can do it, then it's more impressive.
Which, I mean, we don't have kids of our own. I'm sure that, you know, when my kid farts in the right direction, I'm going to freak out. But like, at the same time, do people get excited over things that they shouldn't get excited over just because they don't really think about it much? Like, does that make sense? Like the people that get excited about their animals doing things or about their infant doing things, should we be getting excited over all this stuff, or are we just is our desire for entertainment that strong that like anything will be entertaining to us?
I think
is our standard for entertainment so
I think
low?
Children's a little bit different because there's a progress there. Like you see them come out as these little potatoes that can't do anything. They're just like lumpy, and you're like, well, it can breathe and it can eat and it can poop. That's what it's doing. It's doing it well. And then eventually it starts to like, you know, laugh and learn, and there's progress, and that's pretty cool. But I mean, at a certain point, the dog has learned all its stuff that a dog can learn, and it's just sort of static for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, I still think they can be entertaining.
Right.
But like at the same time, it's not necessarily impressive. I mean, when you teach a dog to do crazy things, like when they're like, this dog knows how to ride a skateboard and do a kickflip, you're like, whoa, okay, all right. Like, I can't even do that.
Yeah.
I guess I'm impressed when animals can do things that I can't do. That's what I'm impressed.
I think, yes. I think that's it. I think that's a much better representation of what it should be, is when an animal can do something that I just can't do, I'm definitely more impressed.
Yeah, that's why like some of the planet Earth type things are cool. You're like when you see like an eagle like flying and like dive bomb out of nowhere and into this water and then pull out a giant fish. I'm like, I couldn't see that fish. It could see it and it could fly down and just like grab it.
But isn't it interesting there that the thing that, because I agree completely, the thing that is unique and that gets our attention is the dive bombing into the water, not the flying of the bird.
Well,
like isn't that interesting? Because it's like, oh, that's what birds do. They fly. And like, it's crazy how that's, if you think about it, that's really interesting. But it's the dive bombing into the water that we find interesting.
I think aspects of flying are cool, and different birds that can do different types of flying. Because you have like what, the condors. Condors, with the way that their like wings are designed, they don't have to really flap that much, and they live in like around very dramatic mountainous regions, and so they like use the updrafts to fly. So they just kind of glide a lot. They really don't do. They're just lazy, and their wings are so big they just kind of float around, and they'll use the drafts to move.
Yeah.
But they do very little flapping. They'll flap like once every like 30 minutes because they just don't need it, because they use natural atmospheric pressures to do all the flying. That's impressive. But then you just see like a pigeon doing its thing. You're like, cool.
You see a Pidgey out in the wild.
Yeah, when you see a Pidgey in the wild, that's impressive. Then
you got to catch it.
You got to catch it. You always have at least one Pidgey,
especially if it's a shiny.
Yeah, and especially if it's early on, then you always need that Pidgey.
Oh yeah.
Later on, who cares?
You're gonna see a Pidgey pretty quickly. You're gonna see a Pidgey in the first patch of wild grass that you walk through, pretty much.
Yeah.
That or a Rattata.
Yeah, and no, I never catch that. Those are
I never caught Rattatas.
And for some reason, every other NPC in the game in the first like half of it always had one. You're just
exactly.
You're like, who cares?
Would you get a Geodude early on in the game?
It depends on what I was doing. If I was, it just depended on my strategy in that game. Depended on also who I picked up as my starter.
As your starter, yeah.
Because the starter also dictated kind of the rest of my team.
Right.
But Geodude was good. Only problem with Geodude is that you really want to get Golem, and to get that you had to trade, and that's a lot of hassle.
That's right. That's very true.
But you know,
I'd always get Bellsprout early on because Bellsprout was so good against rock. And against, there was like a couple that, because if it was Bellsprout, had a Vine Whip, and it would just destroy people.
Oh yeah, I mean it just Again, there's also a different strategy kind of implement. I was just a big fan of picking up like a Nidoran boy.
Yeah. I agree.
You kind of get him up pretty quickly, and actually. The solo Pokemon challenge, like the fastest it's ever been completed, was by a guy who did it with a Nidoran boy. He got it up to a Nido King, and that was his only one. And like he just had the HM slave for doing all the other stuff, but then that was his only one that he did all the other things through, and he like beat the Elite Four, and because you can get the right 4 moves that you can just wreck the Elite Four.
Yeah.
And it's quite impressive. I remember I watched kind of like a highlight reel of it because I forget how quickly he did it, but he did it pretty quickly. And it's also a grind. Goodness,
it's such a grind. I do love watching speedrunning games, though. Speedrunning games. I think we talked about this last week too.
Yeah. We don't need to revisit.
We need to revisit.
They can go back and listen to episode 6.
Episode 6, a Before Work podcast.
Yeah, but goodness, I love how we went from Planet Earth to Pokemon. That was
how do we get on to Planet Earth?
I don't know.
It was about you watching the lack of watching Animal Planet.
Okay, let's go back because we got a sidetrack. I want to come back to this guy, Forrest Galanta or Galliente or whatever.
I forgot this was our conversation.
This dude is like one of those just insane people that you don't believe exists except for like in TV.
Does he just live a life that's like so opposite of normalcy that it's
all right. So you listen to this guy, very normal American accent, like very normal. Like you just think you're just talking with any normal dude who just works wherever. Like,
do you know what you just made me realize?
What?
I said Western Pennsylvania earlier.
Oh yeah, I know. I looked at you and I was like, well, whatever.
There it goes. Didn't take long. Well, we didn't give you a county. We're fine. Keep going.
So, anyways, it's a very interesting. He's a very interesting dude because he starts off they're just talking about like him going into random places and adventuring deep into the jungle and stuff, and that's all interesting. But then you find out this dude was born in Zimbabwe. Again, he's a white looking dude. Like I didn't watch, but I saw the thumbnail on YouTube, and I was like, normal white looking dude. Like, and he looks like a man who might do a lot of outside activities because he kind of has like that tanned, kind of tougher skin. But he's not. But he's not African by any means. And his mom was a like bush pilot and for her career, and like he lived on a farm in Zimbabwe, and then he left when he was 14 and came to the States. And
wait, but before you continue, when I think of bush pilot, I just think of someone who flies around the presidential Bush family. Like they only fly around bushes. Sorry,
and Bush's
going.
baked beans.
That's right. That's right. Keep going.
Anyways, and so like he grew up in a very different culture, but then like moved to America and learned that too. But he's a wildlife expert and like conservationist and stuff, and so he like lives in the woods a lot. Like he's like, oh yeah, I do like months living in. He did like tons of stuff in the Amazon where he just like went into super remote places where like they had to bring like an emergency medic with them, so that way if anybody got like even slightly injured, they could take care of it because he'd be like, oh yeah, we were 6 hours on a boat from this village that then had a pilot, which then could then fly us a day trip over to the hospital. So that's how like far removed they were from. They were like in villages where they were the first white people that they have ever seen.
It's crazy
and
to think
these people
about.
Have like really old versions of Spanish because that's what they learned way back when, and they haven't like there wasn't as much influence internationally that they didn't have their Spanish hadn't changed, and they also still had their native language. I was just like, this dude is crazy, and like not like crazy as in like a whack job, but just like impressively unique, where he has such an interesting perspective on everything because he's lived in Zimbabwe where like he and his mom when his mom wasn't working, she would fly them into random portions of Africa, and they just like walk around the woods with guns. Just like big elephant guns, just being like, let's go on an adventure. Like imagine like your mom being like, hey, we're going to go on a hike. But by that, she means I'm going to take this plane. We're going to go fly somewhere where I feel like stopping. We're going to stop and we're just going to walk around for a couple of days. And then we're going to get back in the plane and go home. Like,
yeah.
What?
It's crazy. And again, we always talk about our like your standard for things is really based on like what you grew up with. It's crazy how that would be a standard for him. So now I'm sure his life is just like versions of that.
Yeah, it's
just
weird.
Versions of what he would do as a kid.
Yeah, and I haven't got to listen to the whole episode, so I'm curious to see where it goes. And I was really disappointed that I arrived at our location at the time that I did because he was just getting to about how his first day in school in America, he was sitting at lunch and to go to eat his apple, he pulled out a pocket knife and tried to start cutting up his apple. Next thing he knew, he was like in handcuffs, and he was like, "What?" Like where he was from, everyone just had knives, and you just like cut up your food with the knife. Yeah. But there, I mean, they were like knife, and like guy probably got tackled and probably took it away from him. We never saw it again.
Doesn't that? I'm sure his childhood too. Doesn't that seem like more of a pure way of raising, not raising your child, but like letting your child experience? Because I'm sure he just has a very pure way of looking at life because of one, like the freedom he had as a kid, and not the freedom to do whatever he wanted, but the freedom to learn. It sounds like survival skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
doesn't that seem like a much pure way to raise your child?
I think there's a lot of risk, so it's tough because you're like, at the same time it can benefit somebody a lot to be able to just experience life and learn as you go, but at the same time it's like you don't really want your kid to get bit by a venomous snake that like eats his flesh away. That's not exactly ideal either. So it's
very true.
So it's a tough balance. I definitely would probably lean more onto the side of safety until they're older, but at the same time, like, this guy has lived a very like unique life. So
I just think in his adulthood now, if crisis comes, like, he's not going to panic. He's just going to like kind of go into action and like do it. You know what I'm saying? Just because of like, I mean, I don't know. I feel like if you have a pure way of being raised, then when adulthood comes, that's just gonna kind of continue into adulthood. But
yeah, I also think that when you live in tougher circumstances, if you aren't willing to become tough, you don't make it. Like, I mean, not to be calloused about it, but like in when you live in these remote, very unconnected villages, the people who survive to adulthood are the tough ones, and the lucky. I mean, sometimes it doesn't matter how tough you are. If you stumble upon a snake and it bites you, it's like, well, that's just sort of how it is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I would prefer where we live now. It's a little more ideal.
I'm not trying to say. I should clarify that. I'm not trying to say, hey, let's all move out to the jungle for a couple years. But like, yeah, I guess it is definitely more survival of the fittest in a lot of those nations.
And the luckiest.
And luckiest. Whereas in the U.S., it's just, let's just keep everyone alive.
Yeah.
Type of deal.
Which I think is interesting. I mean, I've always said this, and if you guys have listened to episode 1, you would know this, that cancer kills everybody. Like these days, like before, no one dies of old age anymore. Like that's not a thing.
Like,
everyone
super rare if it is, where you have like
not really. Like,
I guess even people in the 110s, it's like, well, they had something happening to them.
Yeah, like back in the day, they just didn't know. So that was just like that was the catch-all for all the stuff they didn't know. They're like, well, it wasn't diphtheria, so he died of old age. Like, no, everyone dies of cancer now of some kind, and that or a heart attack. Like, and it's not because they were necessarily unhealthy, but at a certain point, the ticker stops ticking.
Yeah, your body just isn't going to be able to fight anymore because it's so darn old.
So it's just interesting.
Yeah, like I was watching again. We won't get into politics here, but I watched probably 10 minutes of the State of the Union address, and it was just because I was watching Shapiro's coverage of it basically. So they had, we were talking about this yesterday. They had a couple World War II vets that were being recognized by Trump. And these dudes were so old. They
were elderly, that's for sure.
I was impressed by how old they were. And it's crazy. Like we're in our 20s. I remember back in like 2000 and even like the late 90s, like seeing interviews with World War II vets, and they were at that point in their 70s and 80s. And, still kicking it and everything.
Like spunky grandpa.
Yeah, they were like the fun grandpa who was like, wow, we cleared the beach first. And like, they were still into it. But these dudes, this is about 20 years later, just old dudes. And I was just looking at them like, man, they fought in war. Like, Can you imagine the tear on their body that they just fought in war? It's pretty wild, dude.
Yeah, I mean, you think about like the... Band of Brothers. That's fairly old now. That was like mid 2000s that came out. And
is
that earlier?
I want to say it was like 2001, 2002.
Yeah,
because Hanks did Saving Private Ryan in I think 98, and then he immediately started on Band of Brothers with Spielberg.
Okay, yeah. Well, anyways, it's had some good time between then and now, and those dudes were old then.
They were old then,
but they were awesome. I mean, like those interviews.
Those dudes, some of them would bring tears to my eyes. Because they whenever they would talk about. So it was Sergeant Winters was he was the boss.
And a boss.
When some of his dudes would start talking about him, they just say, can't talk about it because of how much they respected him.
Yeah, it's like one of those things that it's not like a sadness necessarily, but like a like an understanding of that, like
of reverence. Like,
yeah, like it's crazy. And I also think like there's a show on Netflix that I think has not gained as much popularity as it should have. It's called Medal of Honor. It's
game?
it's about the Medal of Honor, and it's just each episode covers a Medal of Honor recipient. From different times, since they have stuff World War II, and like some of these, a lot of them were not a lot of them, but like I don't know, maybe half, maybe just very under half were post-mortem recipients. So we don't even have the person that was there, but they have people that they saved talking about this dude, and it's been it's been forever. It's been like I don't know how many years, 60, 70 some years, 80 some years since World War II.
Yeah,
and you have these dudes who, it's been that long, but it's still very real to them. This person did crazy stuff. Like this one dude, supposedly they show pictures of him from that time, and he didn't look like, he wasn't like Rambo, super jacked, like this awesome looking dude. They just this normal looking dude, and he did crazy. The one guy, they were like basically they had their group was like moving through, clearing out an area in France. I think this is post D-Day, and they sent one half of the group out, and they got pretty far away before like a hidden group of the enemy started shooting at them, and they're all pinned down. And the other group that were kind of hiding behind their cover couldn't really go out to do anything because they were also trapped. So these like basically half of the group was just pinned down and was basically just being picked off slowly, and they couldn't really, and the other group couldn't do anything. And this guy's like the leader, and he stayed back, and he decided, I got to do something. And so he just runs flat out straight at the enemy, just like didn't care, just running and shooting. And he gets shot a couple of times and just keeps running. Like he gets shot and gets knocked down and gets back up and keeps running. At one point, like his arm, he couldn't use one arm anymore, so he's just holding the gun with one hand, just shooting. And he finally gets up, and he was scared the enemy basically so bad they gave up once he showed up at their cover. Like he ran from like hundreds of yards in through fire and stops and gets these dudes to surrender, and the rest of the people come from his group and and hold these guys captive. And then when they're doing that, another group of enemy come up over a hill and start shooting at him again, and he just does it again. He just turns and runs at him. And I'm like, this dude gets shot like 30 some times. He saves a bunch of people from the one enemy, but he finally gets killed by the other enemy. But in doing that, shocked them enough that his group could take them too. It was like he saved like dozens of guys by doing this. And you're like, what?
Yeah. When I look at those old, or not old, when I watch like documentaries or like hear stories like that, I have to think, and I do every time, those were real stinking men.
Yeah.
Like those were just real men. Like, again, like you even see footage of like photos that were taken on D-Day when the boats would open and like the front hatch would go down, like the gate would go down, and then you just saw an image of the beach, and people were like shooting into your boat, and the guys just pushed forward.
They had to do it.
Like they just had to go forward. Like those were real men. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite movies is Saving Private Ryan, and like that scene where they're coming onto the beach, and it's just chaos. Like no one really knows what's going on, and they're just doing what they're told, and like they had to keep going. Like if guys fall, they just had to keep doing their job. Like they had their job, and they just knew what they had to do, and that's what they did.
Yeah,
if you gave up, you're basically dead because you had to keep pushing.
Yeah,
and it's insane. Like that's what they did. And again, D-Day is interesting too because we talk about that one beach, but you got to think they did that several other places.
On several of the beaches simultaneously, right?
Yeah, it was like everybody was all together, and they kind of
everyone pretty much talks about Omaha.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's America was like, I think America was at 2 beaches.
Yeah. But
the one was like just us, and I think the other one was split. This is where I wish we had Phil with us. He'd be giving us all the details.
Exactly.
And then they had another beach that was like Australian and Canadian, and then they had one that was like British, I think. I think it was like broken up.
Yeah.
They had kind of people had different, and some beaches were really easy. I know that like the one beach, they basically like kind of like walked up, and everyone's like, oh.
How sweet would that have been?
No one around. But I guess we'll take this beach. Like,
yeah.
And then the other ones were a little more fortified, and that's why they normally talk about Omaha, because it was way more fortified.
Like those bunkers, and like they just had machine guns in them. And dude, you'd walk out of your boat and just have to run onto this beach, bullets flying everywhere. That's insane. Yeah. What a ridiculous situation to be in your life, and how like in the last 100 years, so few people have had to be in that situation. Like in like so few Americans had to be in that situation. Again, hundreds of thousands, if not like a couple million, in that exact scenario, and all the millions that have freedom because of that. Like that's amazing.
Yeah, I think the Medal of Honor show also does a good job, because they talk about a couple of people from the Korean War, and the Korean War is known recently as the Forgotten War.
Right. It's like Vietnam Light.
Yeah, but it's not though. Korean War was actually way more intense than Vietnam.
Really?
But again, people don't know. Like, I didn't realize that either.
I didn't realize that either.
In school, they were like,
Korea was in the 50s, right?
Yeah. It was very much right after World War II, and you had a lot of people who a lot of the people who were in the Korean War were either in World War II or wanted to be in World War II but didn't make it. Like, they were 16 when the war broke out, and then like they're desperate to get in, and like they finally get signed up, and then they're like, and we won, and they're like, and then the Korean War comes around, and they're like, this time for real. So you get a lot of people who were like trying to prove stuff, but like there were again. I'm spoiling so much of the show for people. I'm sorry. No, you can watch it. It's still just like I'm not doing it justice. So if I tell you what goes on, I'm not doing it justice. And you pretty much know that something cool is going to happen every episode, because the show is based around people do something cool. Yeah. But the one from the Korean War was this guy. I can't remember his name. It was something weird, because he was a first generation Japanese American. So his parents were from Japan, but he was born. And,
Jackie Chan?
It wasn't Jackie Chan. And Jackie Chan is Chinese. Oh. You bigot.
Whoops.
Anyways, this guy.
His first name was Jackie. I just thought,
I don't know if his first name was Jackie. I don't know the first name anything. I don't remember what his name was.
We'll have to look up his actual name, because it can't be Jackie.
No.
There's no way.
No. So, and he was an insane dude, because he wanted to be in World War II, but because of the whole like Japanese thing, like they turned him away, because they were they're sort of this like anti-Japanese sentiment with because we're fighting Japan, and again it's not,
which the Japanese were insane.
Yeah,
they're not insane people, but the way that they fought war and took over countries, insanity.
Yeah, they were brutal. But I mean, there's I understand some of the sentiment, and we're not going to talk about that so much. But he didn't get to do World War II. He was old enough, but he didn't make it. So Korean War comes around, he's like, I'm going to do this. I'm proving myself. I love America. I want to be in. And so they're like, sure, you're not Korean, so let's do this thing. And they're on this hill, and they're in like machine gun bunkers, and he's supposed to protect people, and he basically there's just tons of enemy coming at him, and he just like has to take them all out, and so he does. And I'm not going to talk too much about all the details, but he basically takes out an obscene amount of enemies, and then he gets captured and made to like march. With he's in these like captured camps, and moving from one place to another. And at one point, he has to like leave his buddy behind, because they both get captured together. His buddy still makes it, but they like leave him behind for dead, basically. And he was saying that they gave them like a thing of like a container of water, and this like tube of like powder that was like a like flour rice powder. That's what they had to eat for this like week-long trip. That like ration it yourselves. That's basically what they said. They just like gave him this food and water, and you had to like take a little bit of powder and mix it with a little bit of water in your mouth, and that was like how to like make food for yourself. And
that's crazy.
That's what he had to do, and he like survived. He did all this stuff and like lived, and then now I think he's still alive, because they did interviews with him for the show, and he's just this happiest, like most just like life is great, I love everything, I love people kind of guy. And you're like, dude, you've been through some of the most insane things. Like you've killed more people than people should have to kill, first of all.
Right.
And then you nearly died of starvation and exposure in Korea, and you make it back home, and go just back to living life. You're just like, what? It's something that I don't know. Yeah, real men.
Yeah, real men. It'd be an interesting time. Like my parents were born in the early 50s, so they, like, I mean, when they were in their childhood, World War II was still being discussed, like, as, you know, like a major war. And they grew up during the Korean War, and then they had the Vietnam War fairly, you know, quickly after that. So it would be crazy to grow up in that time period, kind of being surrounded by war constantly. Whereas I feel like for us, war was nothing up, and even whenever I forget if was it Afghanistan that like Bush gave them the countdown to, like, if they didn't do anything by this point, then we were going to go to war with them. Or no, it was the war in Iraq, but there was like specific times. I think it was in 2000 it would have been at the end of 2001 or 2002, obviously after
9/11, and then we basically were going after, again, the stuff that's happened in the Middle East is also a little bit interesting, because you have not necessarily wars with countries per se, but more organizations.
Wars with, it's wars with like ideas more.
Yeah, and so that's a little bit. It makes it a little bit goofy, because you go into places like the war in Iraq is a war in Iraq, not the war with Iraq.
Right.
So
because we've been at war with people groups there for 40 years.
Yeah.
In some capacity. Sometimes it's super quiet, but sometimes it's not. But it's like radical people we've always kind of been at war with all over the world.
Yeah,
no matter what your belief is.
And that's also very interesting, because it's more of a volunteer basis. You know, it's not, there's no draft. It's not like they're being like, everybody who meets these requirements has to come in and join the military. You know, it's just like.
Do you think there will ever be a draft again?
I mean, it'd have to be a major conflict with a true country.
I think with Russia. Like if Russia and.
I mean, if a country that is significant enough does there's an actual declared war. We're not fighting a group that is sort of like in a region that you're sort of targeting. You know, if it's like Russia makes an attack and it's like, yep, we're going to war. That would be one. Again, it's hard to say. Again, big countries are not really ever going to attack us, just for the same reason why we don't really want to attack big countries.
Right.
There's sort of a. This military stalemate where
it's more beneficial to not attack each other, obviously.
Yeah,
basically for financial reasons. It's just there's so many treaties that we're in now with so many countries. Again, it's more. You're right. It's more people groups that we don't have treaties with.
Yeah, and again, right now, countries don't fight countries fight like high school girls. It's all passive aggressive, like. Yeah. Like just kind of being like catty with each other instead of actually like doing anything physically aggressive. Like that's just sort of how it is. Like we're just like, oh, did you see what Russia did? Like, I can't believe it.
I guess like compared to even in our country's history with dealing with the world, I mean, the past 100 years has been. Like this is the most peace we've had in the past like 100 years, I'd say, because again,
it's not just for us, but for the world.
For the world, you're right, because it's really just a few smaller individual people groups that no one in the world likes. Yeah. Like not many people like North Korea. Yeah, except for North Korea. Like not many people like radical Islams, except for radical Islams. Like it's people that the world is like, no one really likes you. Like we're all at peace and you're just kind of ruining it for us. So like kind of go for it. But
yeah, and I think that, there's just everyone just realizes it's better to not have to deal with these things. And I think there's a lot more established like togetherness amongst the people in those countries. Like, if Russia took over, let's say Russia and China went at it, at the end, it's going to be a whole lot of work to occupy China, because China's like, we're not Russia, we're China. Even if you win and take us over, we're still China, and we're not going to give that up. Like same thing in America. I mean, no one bordering us really has much of a hope to really take us on. But I mean, it's just like, it's not like the game Risk where you can just like, oh, I've taken you over and now we're together, and like this is just how it is. Like,
and you can go from south South America to Africa in one roll.
Oh yeah, well yeah, you just like declare it and you just follow a little dotted line. But yeah, it's one of those very interesting things that I think like before you it was a little bit different because a lot of it also was like not unclaimed necessarily, but you had territory that wasn't necessarily nearly as identified culturally. And when Japan started doing their thing, like that China wasn't nearly as unified. Like China had groups within it, and you could go over and you just had to be able to subvert those individual groups, and then you just do that multiple times, and you could take over a region culturally more easily. But now, like people in China, they're Chinese, they move around more, and they have much more of a homogenized culture and identity as a country that it's a little bit different. I mean, you could possibly go into places like South America where it's not. You have a lot more remote groups and unclaimed territories that are like kind of not really culturally identified with the country, that you could do something like that, but it's also not worth it because it's a whole lot of work for not a lot of gain. And
didn't China, correct me if I'm wrong, because like they have a ridiculously rich history. So even again, like thousands of years ago, weren't they kind of more regional, and they had rulers for the regions of the land, not necessarily?
Yeah. You before a more unified China, you had more of like a feudal system where you had people who were in kind of militarily and if you call it politics, more monarch style kind of rule of a region. And then when they kind of became more of like an empire, that it was sort of like a state's providence kind of concept where you had regions that were ruled by certain groups, but then they all kind of worked together with the emperor to be a unified. But even that is a much smaller region than what China is now. Like if you think about what China is now, border wise, not like what they were doing before in China was way different. You had much more kind of like unidentified regions where it was more just smaller pockets of villages and stuff that were kind of hard, like they were more clan like than necessarily country like. So you had people like in Mongolia, that were trying to make empires. And then they were taking over portions of China, and then that kind of fell apart, which is also really interesting. When you think about, if you take snapshots of history and you think about, regions that were dominated by a civilization that then just kind of crumbled, and then it's very different. Like
China was one of those, you mean?
Yeah, like China was a region where it was being decimated by Mongols. Like they were just taken over. And then that's not the case anymore.
The people and the Mongols motorcycle club as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch what's the Marco Polo on Netflix?
Yeah.
It's not amazing. It's a pretty good show. Like I think it's worth the time to watch it. They kind of cover that where you have not Genghis Khan. I think it is. Maybe it is. I can't remember. I get them all confused. I just think about Genghis Khan, the Pokemon.
Yes.
Back around to that.
What a great Pokemon. Anyway.
Actually, no, it wasn't.
No? It was cool looking though.
It was a rare Pokemon, so it was just like, ooh, it was
that like big dinosaur looking thing.
It was like a kangaroo dinosaur with little
and it had its shell armor everywhere.
But like that one was cool and all, but really the only thing that made it cool was
it was like Chansey.
It was just like it was rare, but when you got one, you're like, so it really doesn't have any type advantages. And its move set is really limited, and you basically have to get a bunch of TMs to make this thing even worthwhile. And it also is really slow, so you pretty much never get to attack first.
Yeah.
So back to Pokemon again, apparently.
Yeah.
I feel like I've talked a lot about weird things today.
I don't even know how we go from topic to topic. We've kind of always done that though. From the time that we worked together until
pretty much our whole lives when we just have conversations, we just let
bounce.
We just let our spirits run wild.
That's right. Yeah, that's kind of always been. I guess we could even talk about. We've never talked about how we wanted to start this podcast, and I think that's because we decided for the first episode that we released that like we didn't want to just have it, because that's what so many podcasts do is they spend 30 minutes talking about themselves and how and how they wanted to do this podcast. And like, we didn't want to do that the first episode. That's just
No, we don't. I don't think anybody really cares
go
about
against the grain.
why we're doing something. They just want to like.
They just want to be entertained.
Yeah, if they think that we are worth listening to, they're going to listen to us. We don't need to convince them in the first 30 minutes. We don't need to.
We don't want to tug on your heartstrings, people.
And also, we don't really have that dramatic of lives.
I know we don't.
Pretty vanilla.
We're pretty vanilla ice cream. We're just some Caucasian. Well, I mean, kind of Caucasian for me. Americans living where we live, doing what we do.
Evan is ethnically.
I bring the diversity to the show. I bring the diversity to pretty much everywhere I go, where we live. So
yeah. Well, I also think that people look at you and they go, if they don't know your name, they're like, is he
Eduardo? Is he Eduardo? That's pretty much what people think. Racist. Racist.
I can't really tell. What is he? Like that's the kind of. Which also it's got to be fun. I mean, for me, everyone just looks at me and knows exactly. They're just like, oh yeah,
he's Irish.
He's white.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh man.
But I mean, basically, we've just talked like this. This is how we talk when we don't have a microphone in front of our mouth.
Yeah, usually there's a lot more eating food involved.
Yeah. We normally do this over lunch, which would be a cool show to do. We do a show at location one day.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure we don't get anything too crunchy.
Exactly.
To stick to
liquids only.
Yeah, soft foods.
Yeah. We're going to go to a place that strictly sells pudding and milk.
Who wants to hear us chew for an hour straight?
What if that was if I was a very successful podcaster and I was getting 500,000 hits per podcast, I would so troll, and one podcast, it'd just be me eating food. I'd say hello, and then I'd eat food and say, see you guys next week.
Yeah, that'd be entertaining. Or there's just so many other ones.
Yeah.
Or one where you just like whisper the entire time.
Yeah.
Just to like come in and
whisper
really close to the mic.
Yeah. But I mean, we don't have to end the show now, but I do want to say, like, if you guys have, again, we've had people from all over the U.S. and as well as, like we said, Brazil listen. So if there's any topic that you guys want us to cover, or girls want us to cover, or any questions you guys have for us, again, beforeworkpodcast@gmail.com. It'd be cool to take questions from people.
Yeah, I'd love to do a questions segment.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Not that we're interesting either. We just like to talk.
Yeah.
Like, we're not doing this because we think we're interesting.
Well, we think we're interesting.
Well, yeah, like, oh, I think I'm really funny. I think you're hilarious. People probably don't, but whatever. This is almost free, so.
Yeah, I think it's actually entirely free.
I mean, for them, not for us. Though.
Oh, yeah. There's a little bit of sense involved.
A couple of cents. So, MeUndies, if you're out there.
Cover our sense.
I will wear your product every day. I will sponsor your product wherever I go. I will live a MeUndies lifestyle.
Evan will start wearing belly shirts. That way his underwear is always on display.
I do it. You just have to sponsor us. Reach out to us. We're here. You have our Gmail. We don't have yours.
It's just meundies@gmail.com.
It probably is.
No, they probably have their own domain and use their email on their domain. So it's probably like...
we could probably easily find this.
Yeah. Advertisements at meundies.com.
Oh.
/Creed Thoughts.
/Creed Thoughts. Even for the internet, it was pretty... We do have to do this. Jackie Chan's real name. Any guesses? I have no clue.
Oh, talking about Jackie Chan or about the guy I was talking about?
Jackie Chan.
Jackie Chan's real name?
Any guesses on Jackie Chan's real name? Why do I feel like his real name for some reason is John?
Probably. Yeah. I mean, it would surprise me if his name was like Jackie, just because that's... I mean, when you have that many people in a pretty close proximity, you got to get creative on names.
It's true.
So that way it's not just confusing when someone shouts someone's name in a crowded place.
You ready? Jackie Chan. We're on Wikipedia. Wikipedia has never lied to us before. His real name. Oh, baby. His real name is Chan Kong Sang.
Well, there you go.
Chan Kong Sang. That's his real name. How about that, man? Wow, he's getting old. Jackie Chan is 64, and he's still making movies like a boss.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still the case, and this could totally be a rumor, and you could look this up while you're on your phone. But I heard that Jackie Chan, for a long time, didn't really know English, and he had to be fed his lines. Like
line by line, basically.
Yeah, basically for like when he was in movies, they were like feeding him his lines, and he just had to like just say them as best as he could, and so he didn't really know what he was saying necessarily, and he wasn't like he was reading English and then just knowing the lines and saying them. I could be totally wrong. He could be fluent in English and has been speaking it since he was 3, but that's what I've heard, which would be quite impressive because nothing's funnier than when you try to have someone say something, like when you see videos of people who don't know English and you say English and have them repeat it back to you and they try to do their best and it's super wrong.
Right.
So it's impressive if he could get that close where I would believe that he knew English even though he didn't. But at the same time, I mean, the Chinese language it's much more complicated.
Oh, it's so much more intense.
And sound wise, just like the way they have to form things with their mouth. I mean, it trips me up even just trying to like read, the phonetic alphabet version of Chinese words. I'm just like, I'm like, how do they make this sound with their mouth?
It's so impressive.
It's yeah. I mean,
what else is impressive is, I mean, I can't think of any other Asian actor that has broken into Hollywood the way that Jackie Chan did and continues to do.
I think Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee, for sure, but he was definitely known he was known for his acting. He was known more for his martial arts, whereas Jackie Chan is kind of known for his martial arts and kind of being like a fun actor as well.
Yeah, I think he definitely did a good job with martial arts acting, where he again he talks. I've seen interviews where we talked about this, like he definitely took the idea of martial arts and pushed it by being creative in what he'd use. Like there's always that famous thing where he's fighting somebody and he doesn't want to be fighting them. He's just doing it to defend himself, and he's being like, why am I being attacked? I don't know. and then he has
just trying to save my daughter.
Yeah, and then he just he pulls off like people's windshield wipers and then he's using them to like fight with, which also. That's just mean. Like you go out, it's raining, and someone has ripped your windshield wipers off because they were defending themselves against some sort of large thug.
Yeah. But even when I was a kid, like Jackie Chan was the man. Like, and he still is the man. He's just a cool actor. Like he's fun to watch on screen. And he's super lovable. I think that's what it is. Like Jackie Chan is super lovable.
Yeah. I have no idea what he's like in real life, but that's how he's portrayed in movies.
But but even in interviews, I feel like he's just a nice dude.
Yeah.
But again, going back to, we only have a few minutes left here. I mean, I guess this is America. It's a free country. We can do whatever we want. But if we want to keep around the hour, we only have a few minutes left. Jackie Chan, like I said, one of the few Asian actors that has really broken into Hollywood. Why is that? Like, there's Asian actors. Why doesn't Hollywood cast a whole bunch of them? And when you think about it, there's a lot of whitewashing that happens in Asian flicks or Asian films or Asian cinema that Hollywood tries to replicate, but then they kind of whitewash a lot of casts. Like, why is that?
I think some of it is it's a money making business, so
no doubt
it's hard to take a risk, so they know that white people work.
But here's what's so crazy is like when superhero movies especially come out, the Chinese market covers half of the international market. Like that's what doesn't make sense to me is the Chinese markets are insane with cinema.
Yeah, I can.
Why am I saying cinema? Movies.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily that China cares who the actor, what the actors look like, because they just love American culture. So it's more that it's American, not necessarily that it's like they're like, oh, I relate to that person on screen. They're like, we love American culture
because it's different, it's unique.
It's different, it's unique, it's wild compared to what they're used to, and so that's why they enjoy that.
Which shows how crappy Americans are, because not many Americans could care less about Asian culture.
Yeah. It's just how it is. But again, I think that some of it's they're not willing to take the risk because they're afraid that for some reason that like me as a white person is not going to watch a movie because there's an Asian actor. Like I'm like, what? I don't care.
That's not the case at all.
Like I don't care. I care about a good story, a good character, a good actor.
Like Stephen Yeun on Walking Dead was most people's favorite character for many seasons.
Yeah, like I don't know. It's just. Oh, and then they killed him off.
I know, that sucked.
But I mean, that was part of the books or the comics, which the one time they had to stick to the comics.
Yeah. There was, I'll kind of end with this. Bobby Lee, who is an Asian American actor and comedian, was on a show. I can't remember what podcast it was, but he was talking about the same topic, and he brought up Stephen Yeun. And after Stephen Yeun's character, it was either between seasons of Walking Dead or after his character was killed off. Bobby Lee was at a audition and Stephen Yeun was there. And the audition was for a very small role. And Bobby went up to him and was basically like, you have to leave because if you take small roles after what you've just done, then like you basically deserve so much better than this. Like only accept bigger roles with a higher pay grade and a higher whatever to try to advance Asian acting in Hollywood. So it was interesting. Like it was a cool perspective to hear from another Asian actor with that.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of like take the risk because I think that they just assume that because this has worked, we just gotta stick with it. But
yeah, which is not because like it's again we talked about this in video games last week or I think it was last week. Like people like there's not much else to do, so all people are doing now is replicating the same thing. I think that it's crazy, like especially for the Oscars and a lot of these award shows, it's these crazy indie films that push the limit that are winning these awards. Whereas like, again, when it's just kind of dumping out the same trash, again, people unfortunately are used to it by now. But if you want to ever advance Hollywood and movies and film, like you do have to take those risks. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right. Time to head off to work. Start another great day of making those dollar bills, y'all.
Dollar bills, y'all. Thanks for listening again. beforeworkpodcast@gmail.com. Look us up at Twitter at beforeworkpodcast. MeUndies, or I should say at beforeworkpod. MeUndies, we're out here. Give us a listen. We'll see you guys next week.
All right. Bye.